I decided, I looked at the agenda, and I thought we're going to have a lot of people from open data movements showing apps, and you're probably all very familiar with it. I thought what I could contribute today is my unique angle at open data, coming at it as a journalist. You see that I'm wearing a Creative Commons t-shirt. It's not something you see journalists do very often. I actually license all of my content, photos, audio, video, writing, Creative Commons, by attribution, share alike. And as far as I know, I'm the only journalist in Canada who does that. And so I come from open data from a different viewpoint that I got involved with Open Hamilton, and I was at the founding meeting because as a journalist, I was being trained, take, never give. It's one of the rules of journalism is you never give back. You expect people to give you, you don't give back. And I realized that, geez, we need to start working together. And so from that, I got involved with Open Hamilton. Now, Hamilton's an interesting city. We're very close to Toronto, but we're very separate from Toronto. Our open data movement is having progress, slowly but surely. But to give you an idea of how difficult our city government can be, we have an accountability and transparency committee that I have to file a Freedom of Information request to get their minutes. So, and I'm not kidding you, that request is going through on Thursday, 6 months after their last meeting. A little bit about me, basically I'm a nerd, okay? That's the summary of that, is that I didn't plan to end up in journalism. In fact, when I got hired by Maclean's, I didn't even apply for the job. They had hundreds of applicants for the position, they had interviewed them, and they offered me the job because my blog was so comprehensive of coverage of higher education that they decided they didn't want to compete head-to-head. And just to give you an idea of how I wasn't going to become a journalist, 3 days before Maclean's offered me the job, a good friend of mine who was the editor-in-chief of the Eye Opener offered me a column in the Eye Opener, and I turned it down, telling her I have no intention of ever becoming a journalist. She's never let me forget that. So our journalists, the operators, are the cable. Which has more value? I like this because you think about it. We have all these people. We have a switchboard. We have more use of telecommunications ever in our society, but I doubt you could find a Bell office anywhere in Canada with that many employees right there. And I like looking at this and going, what's the greater value there? And what it is, it's the connections. And so I often say about journalism and open data that we're at a pivot point again where we need to decide what we're doing. And if we're trying to control the information, if we're trying to be that switch, the person connecting, it's not going to work. But if we become the switchboard, we become much more valuable. So, one of the great things that I really like about open data is that it removes one of the problems that Web 2.0 created, which for journalists, which was the politicians no longer needed us. And it's been really interesting to watch how Stephen Harper has managed his media relations. He doesn't deal with the media. They get to ride on the bus and they might get 2 questions. And the media, we complain, we scream, we whine, we carry on. Nobody cares. Nobody really cares. And it's not that people do not care about democracy. They just don't see the value of the journalist asking that question. They don't see that as part of the democratic function. And Harper doesn't need us because he's able to get his message out through various platforms. We did not have access to government information. Web 2.0 changed the dynamic. It allowed the government to bypass the journalist. Prior to Web 2.0, the journalist was quite happy. So both benefited, the journalist and the politician benefited from closed data. The journalist, because they were the conduit for information, you had to buy the paper if you wanted to know what was going on in government. The government loved it because they were in control of the information. They decided what the journalists received. And politicians prefer working in vaults. It's not that they want to be secret, it's just human nature. You prefer to, if you have your home office, you probably sometimes close the door, keep the kids, your wife out. It's like that for the politician. If they can work in silence, they're happy. We're happy when we get to do that. And data is like crude for journalists. The less that's available, the more valuable it is. But as I know with the oil sands, we're not drilling the oil sands because of quality. We're drilling it because of price. And at some point, we have to have that change of dynamic there. Same with journalism. So open data is making open government, which is great because, as I said, it's resetting that balance that it got lost. Now, what is the role of the civic app developer in journalism? I look at it that our role is to support our fellow citizens to be informed. We create apps, and I think we welcome their use by larger distribution channels. The old media remains a very large distribution channel. We support the improvement of tools to connect information. We already were having sort of discussion, and where it was going was, well, where are you getting your data? How are you getting your data? And the next step from that discussion in that last presenter would have been, well, what about going this way and improving how you're getting that data? That's what we're doing. We're improving the flow of information. We're improving the ability of people to connect to it. We should encourage for-profits to support our efforts. There is absolutely nothing wrong with getting the Toronto Star to sponsor something that you're developing if you're putting a lot of time into it. Now, the key in that is we have to remain true to our values, which is that at the end, our product has to be open source. It has to be open. And so I had one of my journalism friends go, well, why would the Star invest in something that their competitors could use a couple hours later? Scoops and leads are measured in minutes now in journalism anyway. And the reality is that if a competitor is building off of your product, people notice that. People know where the information comes from. How many times do you read the newspaper and other media reports or television reports, and you know exactly who they're referring to? It's a silly game we play. Now, also, we try to make our fellow citizens better. And I look at it that if they're employed as journalists, that's great. That's a side benefit. But it's passing on our skills. It's holding events like this where we discuss how we're accessing the data, how we can improve our use of the data. And media can be a leader in this. I look to the United Kingdom. How many of you are aware of what ScraperWiki is? How many have used it? Did you know that the funding for that, the seed funding for that, came from a media corporation? Channel 4 in Britain. Britain has more than one public broadcaster. So it is possible for the media to be leading this wave. And as I always note, journalists, we fought the web repeatedly. It's just in the blood of my trade for some reason. You know, I remember when I was at Maclean's, I put comments on my website, on my blog, and I was willing to resign, and I was about to resign because I didn't have comments. And it was this huge thing in the newsroom. What are you doing? Are you crazy? And now you go to every site, journalists blog, they tweet some stream. Some newspapers are even using the dreaded blogging CMS. Some of them are using WordPress. Will we fight Web 3.0? I always ask that question. Will we continue to fight it? Because right now, there are some journalists who use data hit and miss here, but there's none of them that are really pushing it. None of them that are saying, come to our website and here's all the data, all the interviews, all the background documents that we found. And often when they put up background documents, it's because, well, I have 500 pages. I'm hoping you'll do some of my work for me, not with me. It's not a collaborative approach on a regular basis. It's only when it's to our benefit. And now to flip it. I see that also where we're going as developers, I see a clash coming because there's a site called journalism.com in Britain. And what it does is you can put a newspaper article in and you can compare it against press releases and see how much is copied and pasted. And it's only a matter of time before that comes to North America where systems can actually analyze the quality of journalism. And I love these labels, these warning labels here. The one says, if you can't see it clearly, warning, this article is basically just a press release, copied and pasted. And what do I suggest that we try to do? I suggest that we try more and more often to license our materials using a permissive license. So I use the Creative Commons by attribution share alike. And there are 2 Creative Commons licenses that are considered permissive. That one, and then just by attribution. The reason why I like share alike, it has a viral nature. What it says is that if you use my work to build your work has to come back into the pool. It has to be licensed under a permissive license as well. And what does that mean? It means we all benefit. It means we do not have to worry about if our stuff is going to be misused. Some of you are probably going, well, why don't I do non-commercial? The problem with non-commercial is the people who are willing to respect that license are probably the people you want to be using your work, which is to say that if somebody has Google AdWords on their site, or they have sponsorship, or they're a nonprofit, they're still a commercial enterprise. They're a nonprofit commercial enterprise. And they're probably going to respect your license, but you probably want them to actually be using your stuff. The people who are trying to make a lot of profit, by their very nature, they're greedy. They want to hold everything to themselves. So they're not going to use share-alike because they don't want to have to share as well. So it has the exact same effect of making sure that people are not abusing your work without giving back and contributing. The goal I see behind Creative Commons licensing and other licensing is we're trying to create a culture of permissiveness that when somebody sees something great on your site, sees great code, they're not forced to have to email you and you're not forced to respond to 20 emails a day. Hey, can I use that photo? They automatically use that photo, and then everything, I'm using photo for example because last week I took a lot of photos at an event, and that was my last slide. Anyway, a lot of photos, and I had over 25 people use my photos that day. And what happens is that their photos join the pool, and I'm able to use their photos to capture angles where I wasn't at. And all of a sudden, we now have about 24 photographers in Hamilton, when a public event is occurring, are sharing our photos. And we're able to then write our stories or write our blog posts and have the complete story. And that's where we need to go as developers, is we need to work towards being more permissive, more cooperative. And I thank you guys very much for your time tonight.